All right, good afternoon. A short while I will be joined by Frank Latsko, the Director of Global Migration Data at the International Organization for Migration. He will brief you on the launch of the new report titled Fatal Journeys. The Secretary General, as you know, is in Osaka in Japan today, where he's taking part in the G20 Summit. This morning he held a press conference in which he stressed the importance of taking climate action and implementing the 2030 agenda, while noting that we are lagging behind on both fronts. On climate change, the Secretary General emphasized the need for carbon neutrality by 2050 and for more ambitious, nationally determined contributions. He appealed to G20 leaders for a much stronger commitment to climate action, including putting a price on carbon and ending fossil fuel subsidies. On sustainable development, the Secretary General emphasized the need to step up the mobilization of resources and the private sector, as well as to enhance international solidarity. The Secretary General also held meetings with President Xi Jinping of China and Prime Minister Shinzo Abe of Japan. With the Chinese president, the Secretary General discussed the Sustainable Development Goals and climate change and the situation in the Korean Peninsula. In his meeting with Prime Minister Abe, the Secretary General congratulated Japan on the successful presidency of the G20 and also underlined the importance of continued Japanese leadership on climate change. On climate, the World Meteorological Organization said today that the Earth is set to experience its 5 warmest years on record from 2015 to 2019. Increasing greenhouse gas concentrations will fuel the global heat and accompanying ice melt, glacier retreat, sea level rise, ocean heat, and extreme weather for generations to come, the agency said. This warning comes ahead of this weekend's meeting in Abu Dhabi, which intends to galvanize initiatives that will be announced at the September Climate Action Summit, which the Secretary General is organizing. And as we mentioned, both the Secretary General and the Deputy Secretary General are in Abu Dhabi, or will be in Abu Dhabi. On climate, the UN Bonn Climate Change Conference wrapped up today. The UNFCCC Executive Director, Patricia Espinosa, said that while governments have made progress in several important areas, there are still outstanding issues that need to be resolved before the next conference of parties in Chile in order to ensure that ambition is raised so that the worst impacts of climate change can be avoided. The Special Envoy of the Secretary General for Yemen, Martin Griffiths, is scheduled to visit Russia at the beginning of next week and then head on to the United Arab Emirates and Oman with the aim of pursuing his efforts to move the peace process forward in Yemen. The Special Envoy is committed to reaching a comprehensive political solution to the conflict in Yemen and is encouraged by the commitments of the parties and stakeholders to engage with him. Also on Yemen, a new report of the Secretary General on the impact of conflict on children in Yemen paints a devastating picture of the violations affecting boys and girls over the past 5 years. With over 7,500 cases, the most prevalent violations documented by the UN was the killing and maiming of children. The report also documents high levels of recruitment and use of child soldiers. Virginia Gamba, the special representative of the Secretary General for Children in Armed Conflict, described the suffering of children in Yemen as simply appalling. She called on all parties to the conflict to actively engage in peace negotiations and to place the protection of boys and girls at the core of discussions. The full report is available online, and the annual report on children in armed conflict is scheduled for publication in the last week of July. The World Health Organization this morning gave an update on Ebola operations in the Democratic Republic of the Congo. According to the organization, there's been good progress in enhancing the UN system-wide scale-up and implementing ongoing strategic adjustments. There was a decrease in cases this week compared to last week, but the lack of funding to keep supporting the government-led response is still a great concern. WHO's current funding needs are $98 million, of which $43.6 million has been received, leaving a gap of $54.4 million. Also, good news from Uganda, there are currently no active transmission cases of Ebola. WHO said there are no new cases since the first case was identified on June 11th with a family that had traveled from the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Also from the DRC, we have more details today about the wave of violence impacting people in the northeast of the country. According to a preliminary investigation carried out by the UN Joint Human Rights Office, at least 117 people have been killed in the province of Ituri between the 10th and 13th of June. Some of the victims were beheaded, homes and warehouses were looted and burned down. The ferocity and scorched earth nature of the attack suggests the assailants wanted to prevent survivors from returning to their villages. Most of the victims belong to the Hema community. The attackers are reported to be unidentified individuals from the Lendu community. The motives of the perpetrators of these latest attacks is unclear, but the information gathered so far seems to indicate that beyond the intercommunal conflict, there appears to be an additional political and economic motives underlying the assaults. Our human rights colleagues are calling on authorities to carry out a prompt, thorough, impartial, and independent, transparent investigation and to bring the perpetrators to justice. From Libya, our humanitarian colleagues say the number of people displaced by clashes in Tripoli has now surpassed 100,000. In total, 105,000 civilians have now fled their homes, according to the International Organization for Migration, due to the ongoing fighting in and around Tripoli, as well as deteriorating situation along the front lines. The availability of food and other basic commodities is restricted in these areas, either as markets have closed or civilians are unable to access them safely. Water and electricity outages remain. This morning, the Security Council, the mandate of the UN peacekeeping mission in Mali was renewed for a year until June 30th of 2020. Noting the situation in central Mali, the resolution urges Malian authorities to take expedited action to develop and implement a comprehensive strategy to protect civilians, to reduce intercommunal violence, and to ensure that the perpetrators of violations are held accountable. A reminder that at 1:15, the Permanent Mission of Japan and UNICEF are holding an event here at headquarters on vaccine hesitancy and online misinformation about measles vaccines and others. You're all invited. Monday, 3 p.m., there'll be a briefing here by Ambassador Gustavo Meza Cuardo, the permanent representative of Peru and president of the Security Council for the month of July already. It goes fast. But before July comes to a close, as you may know, this year we marked the 50th anniversary of the Stonewall Riots, which took place here in New York, a milestone of the LGBTIQ plus rights. Earlier this week, the Free and Equal, the UN's global campaign against homophobia and transphobia, co-hosted 3 events at World Pride Human Rights Conference here in New York. And this weekend, UN Globe, a staff group fighting for the equality of LGBTIQ plus employees of the UN, has invited all staff to participate in the World Pride March in New York City. And we hope everybody enjoys the weekend. And lastly, as time passes, there are arrivals and departures to note. And today I want to take a minute to note the departure from the press corps of 4 amazing women, Shauna McGee, who is here in the audience and will blush, of Kyoto, Farnas Fasihil of the Wall Street Journal, Irena Andreeva of RIA Novosti, Marie Bourreau of Radio France and Le Monde. They may be succeeded, but they will not be replaced. It's been a great pleasure for myself and my office to work with all of you and to answer your questions. You're all truly great journalists, and please don't forget us too quickly. And lastly, on the arrival side, we have 2 new associate spokespeople in my office, Stéphane Tremblay and Antonio Ferrari. Drop by, start bugging them and annoying them, and you're all welcome. On that note, Shauna, one last dig.
I'll take the last question.
Yeah.
Sorry, I'm a little choked up. Thank you so much. I will miss you too. Please stay in contact. Does the SG have any comments on media reports that Iran has sent in a letter of complaint to the Security Council over what they call a violation of airspace in the latest incident? Is there anything new?
No, well, we've checked as of about half an hour ago. I think the letter had not been received, at least formally. As soon as it is, we will confirm it to you. And obviously, if the letter is meant to be circulated to the Security Council, we will do so promptly. Edie.
I noticed that you said that the Secretary General discussed the DPRK with President Xi Can you give us any details, and are there any plans for the Secretary General to talk to President Trump?
The Secretary General had. Let me take it back. On President Xi, no, I don't have. I don't have any more details, but obviously, for the Secretary General, China has a very important role to play in ensuring in working towards a diplomatic solution to the denuclearization of the Korean peninsula. The Secretary General had a number of informal discussions with other world leaders at the summit, and then he will have more bilaterals tomorrow. Yes, ma'am. Sir, sorry. Go ahead. Yeah.
Thank you, Steph. Just to mention, the Secretary General, during his visit in Osaka, we received two short or medium length, I would say, read out his meetings with Prime Minister Abe and President Xi of China, and specifically mentioned advancement toward climate action. Mm-hmm. Now, yesterday you said that he will be also somehow lobbying, or to use other word, toward those who are somehow obstacles for climate action, including probably U.S. I haven't heard precisely, actually, whether he is going to meet anybody from the U.S.
Look,
and to talk about it.
I think I would refer you to what the Secretary General said in his press conference, and we shared his press encounter, and we shared that transcript. The G20 is a very important opportunity for the Secretary General to talk to world leaders about the need for bold climate action. The Group of 20 represents the vast majority of climate emissions. And so if action is going to be taken in reducing emissions, in getting to a carbon neutral by 2050, it is exactly this group of leaders. And that's his message that he is presenting to them.
Contact with U.S.?
As I said, there was some number of informal discussions during aside events, and the Secretary General is passing that message on to all he talks to. Yes, sir. Hold
Good
on,
afternoon.
let's wait. Go ahead.
Question on, you mentioned MINUSMA, the peacekeeping mandate was extended for another year. Have they released any figures on will the budget be increased beyond the $1 billion? And another question is, are they going to take into some considerations, there's been some concern of the police and the military in Mali. They're saying they're not being protected as adequately as the blue helmets are. I guess they're saying their facilities for the blue helmets are more fortified versus theirs, and they're being more exposed to violence.
Well, I mean, we will do whatever we can to assist the Malians, but there are two separate mandates, and the UN doesn't have any authority or direct control over the Malian Armed Forces or Police Service. As for the budget, I don't have any details offhand, but I do know there are negotiations going on right now in the Fifth Committee regarding the peacekeeping budgets of peacekeeping operations as a whole. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you, Stéphane. On Monday, the Iranian, I believe it was ambassador, mentioned that there were a number of sanctions put on Iranians, one of whom is Foreign Minister Zarif. I understand that as a result of sanctions against Venezuelan Foreign Minister Ariaza, he's unable to come to the United Nations. Does this mean that Zarif will be unable to come to the United Nations?
I don't know. First of all, I can't predict. I don't know the nature, the exact nature or details of those bilateral sanctions. I know as a matter of principle, there is a headquarters agreement with the host country, with the United States, which is there in part to facilitate the travel of officials who intend to business with the UN. But I can't predict what may or may not happen. Welcome.
Thank you. Alan Bulkati with RIA Novosti. I'm a successor of Irina Andreeva. Thank you, sir. As you know, all of you know, President Putin met with President Trump on margins of G20, and according to Putin's spokesman, Mr. Peskov, Trump has shown his readiness to start, or maybe to restart, a dialogue with Russia on strategic stability and disarmament. Well, what's the opinion of Secretary General on that? Thank you.
Well, the progress and dialogue between the United States and the Russian Federation on issues of non-proliferation and disarmament are critical to setting the stage globally, and we do hope that these discussions bear fruit. And I would refer you again, in addition, to what the Secretary General himself said a few hours ago in Osaka on this. All right. Hasta Monday. Oh, we do have, if you don't mind waiting 2 seconds, we do have a guest from the Migration Office who is here.